Behold, it's Natalia. Let's go find some monkeys, shall we?
Did you say sex is like riding a bicycle?
Nothing gets me going like Christmas and wigs. Let's check out this show.
I remember the first creature I beheld. He was a squirrel. His name was Kevin.
I heard you need a DNA sample.
I want to find light and joy in things that bring us together and unite us. And I think science is something that can unite us. Ow. God damn.
There's a world out there, a world that needs to be beheld.
Oh, God, behold! Welcome back to another episode of Survival of the Filthiest, the live stream. I'm your host, Natalia Reagan. I'm a biological anthropologist and comedian, and I created this show because what the futz is happening? I mean, folks, we have a war on science, healthcare, DEI, people of color, gays, bays, jetways, veterans, queers, engineers, the vax, paperbacks, teachers, creatures, women, and today we'll be talking about national parks. So I decided what better way than to resist than talk to scientists, comedians, and advocates who are creating some very good trouble to move this country forward rather than 5,876 steps back. And here's a quick reminder to please like, subscribe, and comment if you enjoy this or if you have any questions. Okay, roses are red. National parks are understaffed. On Valentine's Day, 1,000 heard, "You're fired," with a laugh. And this comes when the National Park Service recorded the highest number of visitors across national park system ever in 2024, a whopping 331.9 million visits. But you won't hear park employees discussing those figures publicly because they've been told to shut the fuck up. Yes, a leaked memo shows that they are being discouraged by the administration from sharing this data. Why? Because the administration doesn't want to look stupid. Spoiler alert, it's too late. That's because, and we know that in 2023, that the 428 national parks, historical sites, and other attractions generated over $26 billion in visiting costs, $19.4 billion in labor income, with a total of $55.6 billion in economic output in the national economy. Oh, and not to mention the 415,000 jobs that are created around the local area of national parks. So, folks, in 2025, the National Park Service requested a meager budget of $3.57 billion for day-to-day operations and other priorities. And if last year brought in over 15 times that for the national economy, and Donnie is supposed to be a businessman, that doesn't seem very good for business. And actually, the National Park Service only employs roughly 20,000 permanent, temporary, and seasonal employees. And just yesterday, managers at National Park Services were asked to put together plans to eliminate 30% of payroll. Folks, the average salary for a U.S. park ranger is about $42,000 a year, or about $21 an hour, roughly $3,500 a month before taxes. The average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in the U.S. is currently $1,700 a month. This is madness. So again, what else is madness? The visitors. Think about the visitors. A recession is upon us. Where are we going to go? We're not going to Disneyland because two adult tickets to Disneyland are $450 plus parking. And what if we want to eat? And what if we have kids? Do we just eat the kids? Because we know that, Disneyland is not very cheap. So where can we go? We go to the national parks. We go there to recharge, learn about the world around us, to take care of our mental and physical health. But given all the executive orders that we've seen in the last 2 months, it's clear this administration doesn't give a flying fuxicle about our well-being. And this is the thing. When you're dealing with a narcissist, which our country is being run by, you know that their decisions are all transactional. What can you get from something? And since the only half dome Donnie cares about are his daughter's sweater cows, the national parks are useless. Well, they're currently useless. He wants to cut down 280 million acres of national forest because that is what they're worth to him. It's money. It is the resources. He wants to drill, baby, drill instead of investing in sustainable energy sources. He wants to plunder the parks. So what do? We got to resist. I don't know. I feel like we need to appeal to the squatchers out there, the Bigfoot believers, the folks that want to get out there and still find joy in the park, because this is a bipartisan issue. Everybody loves nature. Everybody loves the parks. Besides, how do we know if bears shit in the woods if we don't have park rangers left. That's why I am thrilled to talk to my friend, author, wildlife advocate, and California director of the National Wildlife Federation. I'm going to say a couple things about Beth Pratt because I love this woman so much. She has worked in environmental leadership for over 25 years and in two of the country's largest national parks, Yosemite and Yellowstone. As a regional executive director of the California Regional Center of Wildlife, National Wildlife Federation, before joining the Federation in 2011, she worked on sustainability and climate change programs for Xanterra. I hope I said that right. Xanterra Parks and Resorts in Yellowstone and is as its director of environmental affairs. Prior to her role in Yellowstone for 9 years, Beth served as vice president slash CEO for the nonprofit Yosemite Association, excuse me, now Yosemite Conservancy, and the Yosemite National Park. But honestly, folks, when I think of national parks, I think of Beth Pratt because not only does she work with the parks for years, she lives right up against Yosemite Park. Welcome, Beth. I am so glad to have you back, my fellow cougar.
Yes, and I love you too, Natalia, and I love that bear poop was part of my introduction. That's great.
Do bears
Yeah,
shit in the woods?
yeah, I absolutely do. I see it all the time, even in my yard. But
Okay. Okay.
yeah.
They just look like tubes of berries, right? Because they just eat so many of.
Well, they're pretty bear poop is pretty recognizable. But yeah, they most people think that bears are these, carnivorous. So yeah, most of their diet is actually vegetation. They love berries. I think grizzly bears are mostly, used to be mostly vegan before we interfered with their diets. So, yeah, they just like to kind of munch on flowers. Kind of dispels the myth, right?
I love that. They're like, yeah, it feels like,
Mhm.
little thumper Bambi action
Yeah,
right there, just like rolling
bear
among.
bunnies. Yeah, they're
I
like
never
bear
thought of.
bunnies.
Yeah, exactly. They really do just survive. Well, I guess if they eat honey, are they vegan?
Yeah, honey's
Oh, that's a
technically
good
not
question.
vegan, so that's a good point.
Oh, that's a good question. Okay, okay.
Vegetarian. Mostly
Well,
vegetarian.
mostly, yeah, exactly. There we go. Vegetarian. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what I call. They eat a little fish here and there. I am so happy to have you here. I've been thinking about you during this time. Well, tell me a little bit about your, thoughts on what's happening with the national parks. What is happening and how are people being directly affected?
Yeah, and thanks for having me. I think it's such an important topic. I have been working in national parks for my entire life. Even the wildlife crossing, which is the project I've been working on now since 2012, is in the Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area. Our main partner is the National Park Service, who's been doing the research that showed us that we needed a crossing and tells us so much more. But parks for me is a lifelong connection. I have a book coming out this fall called Yosemite Wildlife, and in the preface, I detail that as a little girl, I would look at those old books called, Western Parks or National Parks of the U.S. and dream about visiting, especially the Western parks for me, the big mountains. You grew up in Massachusetts, Mount Washington's no slouch, but it certainly ain't, a 14er. And, so I always dreamed of the big peaks and dreamed of the big Western parks and was, really was lucky and dedicated enough to have my dream come true. I worked in Yellowstone for 4 years, worked, in Yosemite for, 9 years, work in the Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area now, and my home, quite purposely, is on the southwestern, outside the park gate, to Yosemite, and I'm in that park, and other public lands. I live right on outside of BLM land, U.S. Forest Service land, so I'm using national parks and public lands all the time. So, I have a long, deep connection to these public lands, as do most Americans. So I have to say, it's been both, it's both brought me great sadness, but also made me furious that the last month I have had to defend national parks. I never, if you had told me when I started out working for wildlife and conservation that later in my, that I'd have to be on CNN defending the existence of national parks and park rangers. I never would have called this. National parks are something that we've always agreed on and other
Yeah.
public lands. Reagan loved wildlife. He helped with mountain lion protections in California. Nixon passed the Endangered Species Act. George W. Bush was a big parky. Gerald Ford was a park ranger. Again, I could list forever the Republican heritage around. But Teddy Roosevelt was
Yeah.
someone who helped form Yosemite and Yellowstone, right? So I'm both incredulous that these public lands and national parks are under attack and furious. How dare they? This is our national heritage. And I think, we'll get into the details, but I think for me, paramount is you don't get do-overs.
Yeah.
You back off on protections. Wildlife will die. They don't come back. You have people cutting down Joshua trees and, driving in sensitive meadows, or you sell off public lands for development. You don't get a do-over. And I'm just, we're really putting these places at risk. And I don't even think they've gotten started from what I'm hearing.
Yeah, no, that's what it really terrifies me. I feel like every day I see a new announcement, and it brings me to tears because, like you said, there
Right.
are no do overs.
There are
You
no
know,
do-overs. Yeah.
yeah, and one of the best, I don't know, words of advice recently was, I always thought of activism, being kind of the way to be in this situation, but that inherently means fighting, and it's like we're more stewards, we're more caretakers of the land, and kind of come at it from that way. But it's almost hard to know how to combat these decisions. And I mean, what are the plans right now? Do you know what the national park is thinking about how to sort of help either negotiate or fight for their own existence?
I think it really is gonna be up to folks, outside the federal government. As you know, I think most alarming to me, and I have a lot of friends who are still work for the Park Service. I've talked to some former directors of the Park Service. As you noted in your intro, they're told not to talk. They're frightened for their jobs. They're frightened that their programs will be cut and that more damage will be done. So I think that, this sort of gag order is also really disturbing. So I think it is going to be incumbent on people like us who are not within these federal agencies to stand up for them. And that's everybody. That is not just those of us who work and for conservation and the environment. Again, almost every American uses a national park. There are urban parks. Almost every American has gone to a national wildlife refuge, to a BLM site. Again, I could go on and on. The Bureau of Land Management, people go boating, people go hiking, right? US Forest Service. We've all benefited. We all have traditions, whether it be camping or hiking or fishing. So I think it really is our responsibility. I don't care who you vote for, to stand up for these public lands. I think that the federal agencies, and there's some incredible leaders in them, are kind of backed into a corner. They report to the federal government, and we have to have courage in these times and let the administration know that this is not okay on behalf of our federal partners who have done so much. I think, Natalia, what disturbs me, listen, I'm not a typical tree hugger. I have a biology field undergrad, but I have an MBA. And listen, there's government programs I would trim, right? I think we
Yeah.
all would. But, it's not unique to government. Companies have, fat on the bone sometimes, right? Again, I think we can all relate to that. We have to tighten our belts at some point. I think it was the way these cuts were made indiscriminately, cruelly, to have, Musk or President Trump say these people were sloppy, that they needed that, this was fat. I'll tell you, park rangers on the ground are some of the best people I know. They work for nothing. I mean, I know people who make less than the average you cited. They work long hours serving the public. They could be making much, much more elsewhere and have much easier jobs elsewhere. You do not become a park ranger because you want to get rich or because you're lazy. It's because you want to serve these public lands and you want to serve the public that come there. So this is also not going to save the federal budget. And indeed, as you pointed out, these local economies it's going to impact. Our parks make money for the world. It is not a good business decision. But even if they didn't, I would offer profit is not the bottom line here. These public lands, and especially our national parks, were mandated by Congress as we have to protect them unimpaired for future generations and for the wildlife and nature that within. So it shouldn't even be the bottom line. But there's no doubt the ROI here, you're messing with, as you said, there's billions of dollars that parks fuel into economies surrounding them, my own included. I live in a really small town of 300. Our county seat, Mariposa, I live outside it. The population there is just about 2,000. That local economy is driven not just by park visitors, but by park staff who live there and eat and shop and all that. So you start backing off on the visitation, you start backing off on the people who work in parks, that is a ripple effect.
Gosh, so what will be immediately, um, who will be immediately affected, and what can
Mhm.
we expect if we say go to Yosemite National Park in the next coming weeks? Are there
No, I
immediate
think we
change?
don't know yet. I think some of the writing's on the wall. I've seen posts from other parks, visitor center closed, no more park ranger programs. I think I hear some pundits like, well, it was only, 11 positions in Yosemite, but you're already talking about, and I don't even know that that's true, right? If you back out the seasonals, they haven't been able to hire, which, this time of year is usually you're having all your seasonals in the door because park visitation goes through the roof from Memorial Day to Labor Day. But you have to understand that these parks are already underfunded. I forget the exact stat. I should have looked it up. But as somebody who's worked for nonprofits that support parks, like the Yosemite Conservancy, like there's a nonprofit for every park. I think it's something like 40% of the park's budget comes from federal appropriations. Nonprofits, other things make up the difference. Volunteers, you name it. They are already operating, especially with on the ground services, short. So, you cut one out of a staff of, like, let's say five, the work doesn't go away if you're going to keep the visitor services open. So I think we know they're going to be short with on the ground help. We don't know how it's exactly going to play out, but there will be impacts. And anybody that tells you there isn't, and I'm finding leaders, business associations being really disingenuous. Our representative here at Clintlock, he said that, oh, Yosemite would be fine. These cuts were needed. Bullshit. I'm calling it. That is absolutely false. Come to Yosemite, see what these people do on the ground. Already the campground reservation system was paused just because they didn't know if they'd have this, my guess is they didn't know if they were going to have the seasonal help or even this help to run it. And I think you'll see more impacts like that as we move forward. Although I forget the number, they rescinded and allowed them to hire some seasonal help, but it is in some respects too late. These parks are now having to scramble to bring people in the door when it should have been months ago to get them up to speed. Some of the people they hired who were experienced seasonals who had been coming back year after year, of course, is like, frig this, I'm taking another job. I have rent to pay. So even that swing back is having an impact as well as the probationary employees who that was not rescinded. To me, that was the cruelest barb of all, was to send these people an email saying because of poor job performance, it had nothing to do with it. These people on probation could have been a 20-year stellar employee who just moved into another job. So to insult our park rangers, some of our most dedicated public servants, was inexcusable. It was shameful.
Yeah, I saw a couple, posts of folks that moved across the country for a job, mid-career or towards the end of their career, and have to start kind of over again now
Yep.
because they have no job to go to. Yeah, what animals would you say are most vulnerable to cuts like this?
Well, all of them. I think, when you look at big both, park by park, but also the bigger picture is, we're living in a time, we're living in a time of great climate disruption. I mean, that this administration is denying that. Although I heard it was a headline today. Yeah, we accept climate change is happening. I think it was I forget. I have to look it up. I saw it on Twitter, but one of our elected officials in Washington said, "Yep, climate change is happening, but it's just the cost of doing business in this era." Wow. Okay.
Okay.
Really?
Wow. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, that to me is a stunning, especially given it you don't even need to get into wildlife, the human impact. Look at the LA fires, look at, sea level rise, the flooding in North Carolina, right? The writing is on the wall. The science is clear here. So we're living in a time of great climate disruption, of biodiversity collapse. I mean, I just saw a study of the really significant decrease of butterflies, one of my favorite species.
Mm,
And listen, guys, you may not think butterflies are pretty, but we need pollinators. Like, hello, the
yep.
insect world is pretty important to us, even if you don't like it, or we may not have food. But the problem is, it's not just the staff cuts. It's this sort of wanting to, the desire to walk back protections like national monuments. I'm hearing selling off of some public lands. So not only are we going the wrong direction into giving wildlife and the ecological functioning of the landscape what it needs, so we're walking back just the land protections overall. But then when you talk about walking back the manpower or the people power in these parks, that has an incredible impact. We need to look no further than the pandemic. These parks got trashed. Absolutely trashed. I saw it firsthand. This is not hyperbole. Trash everywhere. People driving on meadows, people chainsawing down Joshua trees. I mean, it was like a free for all because you didn't have the boots on the
Wow.
ground to
Yeah.
manage the protections. And do we really wanna go there again? So it means a lot for all species of wildlife, and it means a lot for the landscape in a negative way to back off on these. I'll give you, one example. Bears are a
Mhm.
great example. So bears in
The
Yosemite,
vegans.
the vegans, yeah, our vegan
Yeah.
bears,
The vegans.
are mostly vegan bears.
Yeah.
Bears are an animal everybody wants to see, they love. When I worked in Yellowstone, everybody wanted to see a bear, and I worked in Yosemite. Um, and bears, unlike, some other animals, like mountain lions are never going to get into our trash. They're obligate carnivores. They don't eat our food for the most part, right? But bears, coyotes, animals like that do. They're like, oh, whoa, this is, trash, of burger buns. Yeah, great. This is much easier to procure than a, plant meal or finding ants or, whatever. Um, so Yosemite had a really in the 90s bad problem with people, right? It was not a bear problem, it was people, not storing their trash well, bears were bringing into cars, breaking into campgrounds, and it resulted in the death of a lot of bears because that at the time was the only recourse, was to put
Wow.
down the problem bears so it didn't become a safety issue. But they shifted. I actually worked on this in the late 90s. Some federal appropriations come through. You then had boots on the ground, educating people. We did a whole education program. We also bought storage lockers for food when people in the camera, this really sweeping efforts. It literally went from in the Yosemite Valley, almost $750,000 in property damage every year to pretty much zero. You pull rangers out of that ongoing education. You pull custodians out from making sure the trash is managed well. Bears will die. No way around it. So that's just one example. I mean, you just talk
Yeah.
about the sensitive nature of wildlife habitat. And if you don't have people either doing the research or there for protection, I am really worried about the future. And, our wildlife has so little refuges, whether it's a national wildlife refuge or a national park. This is all they got left. Again, there's no do-overs here.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. It's either like you either be all in, like have parks have funding and where, humans visit the parks, but humans also are custodians of the parks, or we
Mhm.
just get out and let them have it. Because otherwise, like you said, if this half in, half out means that animals will suffer, they
Right.
will ultimately get killed. And so it's Yeah, oh god, it's so
It's
it's
horrible.
hard to
It's
say.
I can't believe I'm looking at my library, I'm looking at all these old books, National Parks of the
Yes.
USA, Wilderness USA, America's National Parks. I'm looking at Ken Burns's,
Oh,
documentary, America's Best Idea,
yeah,
right? I mean,
yeah.
this was celebrated as something that we formed here that the world looked at as such a great concept, public preserved lands so that people could enjoy them, so that wildlife had space. And I'm looking at this library of all these books dedicated to it. And what? This is where we're at? Attacking
Yeah.
parks, park rangers? Like, what happened?
They don't see the intrinsic value of land and parks and wildlife, and that's the thing is the commodification of just about anything and everything. And I feel like when I worked in primate conservation, looking at the immediate problem of deforestation, just trying to raise cattle, right? Because I needed money in the immediate time rather than looking at the long term effects
Right.
that would have, because that leads to desertification. That means that cattle can't be raised on a desert. So like over time they've reforested, or even and seeing the intrinsic value of a forest and the wildlife, and the monkeys as seed dispersers and things of that sort. Or even I think of Virunga Park, where the gorillas now are seen as a commodity, rather than to exploit for bush meat or selling their hands as ashtrays. We can use this as tourism, right? And bring
Right.
in revenue that way. So I don't know. Again, like I joke that appealing to the squatchers, but because you mentioned that this is a bipartisan, people
Bipartisan.
on both sides love the parks. Do we have to we have to do GoFundMe's for our healthcare. We're going to have to do GoFundMe's for our cancer research soon. Are we going to have to do GoFundMe's to buy up the parks so we can
I
keep them
have to
safe?
say that's, I've been talking with a lot of nonprofits and, strategy. And I think that's one thing is if some of these properties go up to say for sale, is it likely they'll put a Yosemite up for sale? I don't, I mean,
Oh,
I probably a month ago would have said no, and it probably is unlikely, but could they bring, instead of the Park Service, a private company in to run it, which might even be just as bad? I feel like that's where we're kind of headed. And, we don't want Disney running the national park. And no, I love Disney World. Don't get me wrong. They do great customer service, but again, parks are a different animal, literally, right? They are supposed to be in the public trust, and we want dedicated public servants working for them. Park rangers know how to protect the landscape. If we're going to look for fat in the federal government, I would not be looking at park rangers or scientists working in parks. I mean, that is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Even us in nonprofits, I'm not in this to get rich. I could be making 5 times my salary with my MBA, right? We're in this because we're there for the public good. We want to preserve the environment. We want to preserve wildlife. We want people to be able to enjoy these beautiful places and have access to them. So, and yeah, I'm as puzzled over everybody. Again, I think it is really going to be incumbent on everybody, again, no matter how you vote, to really step up and defend the parks, defend the people working on these public lands. And I'm not sure what else to do, but I do think there is if these lands go up for sale, we better be ready, because again, no do-overs, no do-overs.
no. And I think of the indigenous community as well. I don't know if you have heard anything, in terms of their responses, or how they are handling all of this as well, because I mean this is just, it feels like it doesn't end, just stealing of land and then destroying of land, and over and
Mhm.
over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, I have seen some of them. I won't speak for them, but yeah, I'm sure in some respects this is familiar territory for them who have been through it. But I mean, I'm sure they're having the same conversations, because listen, if parks are up for grab, I'm sure federal tribal recognition is too. So,
Mm.
I think that nothing is off limits with this administration. So it's to me, yeah, it's it's
What is
shameful.
happening? What is
Again, I
happening,
think that
Beth?
we can all look at, if it was more a message of unity. People point to Clinton as sort of this gotcha moment, like, see, a Democrat did it. Yeah, but Clinton approached reducing the deficit very differently and laying off people with compassion, humanity, and strategy, right? It wasn't just this kind of across the board cuts. Let's look at what's vital. Let's look at what has economic return or what would have really impactful consequences if we cut, much like a business would do, or at least a good business would do. So, why aren't we approaching it that way? I'm sure if you go to these superintendents or these park managers who know the parks and say you need to reduce your budget, they will manage it in a way that is effective. These sweeping cuts, these just eliminating all seasonals, eliminating probationary, is no way to run a business.
Yeah.
I mean, even if it was a business, and it's not.
No, and I feel like I know people who have done that. They've been like the cleanup person that goes into companies, and it's a job because you have to look at the numbers. You have to do
Right.
full data analysis to understand. Because I heard a one report, just the idea that you could perhaps lay somebody off that's a park ranger that is also an excellent climber and is like the search and rescue dude that you
Exactly.
bring in, and then Steve, search and rescue Steve is gone, and you're stuck up a mountain. I'm sorry, you're screwed,
You're screwed. That's what people don't understand. These jobs, like, one of my friends, who he's since retired, but he was law enforcement and an interpretive ranger and did search and rescue. And, a lot of these people, you're losing experience and you're losing multiple roles, right? These are
Yeah.
people who get called on, sometimes when there's wildland fires and have to go in, but they were laying off people who help with fire resiliency of all things. But yeah, you have climbing, people who it may not be their day job, but go out on search and rescue and are the only ones who can climb. And so to me, it's, you're putting the parts at risk. You're also putting people at risk who are visiting them. If you have, if you're out there hiking and you get yourself into trouble, which, people often do, and they got nobody who can come get you because their volunteer search and rescue has been gutted. Um, yeah, you're in trouble. I mean, they don't have like this robust paid search and rescue team just sitting around. Often I was out with some biologists last year. We were doing a butterfly survey and
Oh.
they had a search and rescue incident happen and they got pulled off because they had the skills. Now that wasn't their day job. But yeah, I just think here's what I said this on another news thing. Like, I wish President Trump would just come visit these parks or his administration, because to me, the way they're approaching public land cuts shows that they just do not know how these places operate. He did a NASCAR lap. Come do a lap of Yosemite. Hey, it's hard not to be moved by the landscape and what you're going to see, but it's also, to me, learn about what these parks do and what's needed.
Uh-oh. Sorry, I lost you for a second.
Oh,
You were in
it's
the
okay.
vortex of. Yeah, I'm so sorry. I was like going,
It's
come
probably
back,
my
Beth." I don't know
internet.
if it.
I live rurally. We have rural internet, so you never know.
That's okay. It's just
Mhm.
5 hamsters and wheels just,
Yep.
pedaling to. But
Exactly.
I'm so sorry. I
Mhm.
feel like you probably said one of the most profound things ever, and I was just sitting there going,
Oh, what
what do
I
you?
said was, I feel like, if I don't know where I ended, but I feel like, President Trump and those making these cuts do not understand how parks operate, and or any public land agency. And I said this on, I think, CNN or another. I invite President Trump and those, President Trump did a NASCAR lap. Come do a Yosemite lap, right? It's going to be hard not to be moved by this landscape or by these landscapes and what you see, but also come see what these people are doing. Again, you want to talk about hardworking people. These are
Yep.
the people you want to stay employed. They're all working. Park rangers, again, I've worked with these people my whole career. They're doing multiple jobs for very little money and serving the public good. These are people you want on your payroll. These are not people you want to cut. And also just see what these sort of indiscriminate and kind of cruel cuts will do to the park. Come meet with the park superintendents, come meet with the park managers, learn about what these parks are before you are taking these really ill-advised actions.
No, I think that is an excellent, invitation to bring him there. I worry though, and this is brings me to my next point. I worry that electing I don't want to call him, he's not really a politician, but electing these politicians into office that have no interest in the outdoors, no interest in wildlife, no interest in just, again, the intrinsic value of the land that we live on is a problem. And that, if there's not a golf cart that can drive him around or a NASCAR that can take him on a loop through the valley, he's not going to understand quite the value. And I think about the call to have scientists run for office or wildlife advocates run for office. Beth Pratt run for office.
God, no, I don't think I'd be
No,
very good at
ah,
it.
but
But
do you?
you're on to
Yeah.
something. I listen, this is what I'll say is Republicans stand up. I mean, my God. Again, national parks and public lands were never a partisan issue. I listed off how many Republicans, the public lands have their foundation in the Republican Party. I mean, again, Teddy Roosevelt being one of them. Um, we need some Republicans to stand up right now. I am begging you to do the right thing and talk to your party about that. Public lands are something your constituents love. I mean, again, I look at McClintock. They had to cancel his town hall meeting here in my area because I think he was afraid. He was getting so many phone calls about, from his constituents, myself included, saying these cuts are not right. And he took the coward's way out. He gaslit. Oh, the parks are fine. These cuts are needed. He, as well as anybody, knows how important this park is to the local economy. Yet I just, please, Republicans, you need to stand up. Leadership means courage. And I think that's the thing that puzzles me as well. My own organization, the National Wildlife Federation, a very bipartisan organization. You got animal rights Californians like me who work with hunters, who are Republicans in Wyoming, and we come together around the common cause of conservation. It's always been a democratic, not a one party ideal. So the Republican Party, please, I don't know what to say, but it is going to take you really standing up, because right now, we can wait to, have more wildlife advocates and scientists elected, but that's what, midterms and 4 years from
Oh,
now. The damage will be done. And again, we don't get it back. We don't get the bears who die back. We don't get these landscapes back that are developed because they're sold off, or that are destroyed because of a lack of protections, because we don't have park rangers to protect them. So I really am begging the Republican Party to stand up right now. It's the right thing to do. Most people support these parks. That's what it's going to take right now, Natalia. But yes, we do need, I think it begs the larger issue, which your show is about. I think the other thing that has been shocking to me, and this started before this current election, but the sort of anti-science attitude that has crept into our national discourse. um I never would have called that either, as a person, it's not my day job, but I consider myself a scientist. As a person of science my whole life, that is as disturbing to me as well, to not follow the science.
yeah, it's been creeping, but it's interesting. I did a thing called Dr. Todd, or Talking Shit with Dr. Todd and Natalia web series. And one of their videos in 2016 was about this rise of this an intellectual movement, whether it
Mm.
was anti-evolution, vax, just anti-science all around, and really distrusting science. And there was a lot of politicians that kept saying, I'm not a scientist, but, and it was, very troubling, because it was like, you might not be a scientist, but why don't you either elect or hire a scientist to help inform your decisions? Because again, like you mentioned before, climate change is upon us, and human lives will be lost on both sides of the aisle. So it just seems so ridiculous that we're, ignoring the science and thinking that it's has this agenda, this science agenda, kind of like the gay agenda. It's like there's no agenda
There's no
other than to
agenda
find
in
truth.
science.
Find truth. Yeah.
That's what we like about it. There's no agenda. We pursue truth. We pursue truth that we can apply to better ourselves. I mean, it always puzzles me, like, you don't like science, yet you trust a weather forecast. You don't like science, but Yeah, okay, jump off a building and see if gravity's sound. I mean, I just science, we use science every day. You drive a car, that's science. You drive over a bridge, that's science. You know how to, I mean, we benefit from it daily. And to
Yeah.
me, that measles are coming back, that people are
Oh,
okay with polio. I mean, I don't even know what to say about that, right?
let's just look at FDR. I mean, if you wanna talk about polio, I mean, how quickly we forget
Exactly.
or we're never educated, because that's the other thing I think is really terrifying is the amount that it's not taught early on that science is more of a verb than a noun. It is a process. And that's why I think with COVID and the rise of the anti-vaxxers is that as we gather more data, are going to change because we have more data
Hey,
and
it's a
good science
science is
will
a
change.
process. I
Yeah.
love how you put that. And what I love is we test hypotheses, we test data. And this is not, you don't get this in religion, right? You don't get this in others. This is what makes science stand out and why it is what should guide us, right? Which is we test data, and when it doesn't work, we change.
Mhm.
Like I'll give you an example of the field I work in. When I was coming up in conservation, we were taught you put aside a Yosemite, you put aside a Yellowstone or a national wildlife refuge, done. You've protected wildlife. Okay. Well, what the science has shown, and what I've just spent the last 14 years of my life working on is connectivity. That actually, no, it doesn't work. Yes, you need places like Yosemite or national wildlife refuges where wildlife have primacy, but you need connected landscapes for it to work. Wildlife does not recognize boundaries,
Hmm.
and you need large landscape movements. So indeed, these islands of habitats don't work as well. We need to, so we were wrong, right? We were wrong when we put the 101 in and thought that the Santa Monica Mountains would be okay because there's lots of open space. So that's where we test data and we shift. Now we're shifting to large landscape connectivity. But yeah, I feel like, again, for those who are anti-science, it's like these gotcha moments. Yeah, was COVID all out of the gate a perfect response? No, because listen, do people not know about viruses? I mean, my God, they are complex. They
No, you don't.
the point was we saved lives with what we did. And it could have been a lot worse. And we still don't know everything about the COVID, but about these viruses and how they and the next one will hit and the next one will hit. But God, we did a phenomenal job thanks to science quickly using knowledge that we had and trying to figure out how to minimize the damage. And we should be thankful to science for that and scientists. Instead, what we took off, security protection for Fauci, and he's declared a
Fauci.
criminal. I mean, what the hell?
Yeah. I mean, this is I don't I'm not trying to be alarmist, but this is very 1930s Germany of scientists being vilified, and having to a lot of scientists fled Germany because of for fear of their own safety, including Einstein, you know?
Yeah.
So again, not protecting Fauci shows just how little science is appreciated. And
And I
that
think
right there, yeah.
exactly. We use
And for
science you use science a million times a day or
oh,
benefit it in your
yeah.
daily lives, and people need to understand that. We would not want a world without, scientific advancement. I'm, for one, am glad we don't die because of our appendix today. I'm glad that more women don't, die in childbirth like they used to. I'm glad we have penicillin. I'm glad we have vaccinations. I mean, just go down the list. And for people sort of romanticizing that we were okay without all this stuff,
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
that's the thing.
read a little
Yeah.
history, you know?
Right? I've talked about that quite a bit about like, even when people talk about being pro-life or pro-choice, I'm like, what's much more dangerous is having a child rather than not having a child. Cause even
Exactly.
still, even though maternal mortality rates have gone down, they're one of the highest here in the US. And unfortunately, some of the words that are not allowed to be, for the NSF grants that they're like the banned words, is basically women, female, and these are
No.
and things are going to suffer like women's or maternal
Mhm.
mortality rates over time. So I mean, even the things that we are considered good at here in the US, we used to be, now we're not, and it's just only going to suffer as time goes on.
And I'll
But
say this, it's gonna be controversial, but left, you gotta own this too. The
mm,
left is, the extreme left is also, annoys me because they veer into
oh,
the anti-science as well,
the
and
maha.
yeah, using some of the same tactics the extreme right does. So guys, you gotta own that, and I think that has been troubling for me as well. So although it's prevalently, obviously, right now, a right problem. The left is complicit in a lot of areas in this kind of anti-science, you know, um, non-factual, in places. Which, come on, guys, we got to be better.
I read it in a mommy blog that vaccines made my dog gay,
Exactly. Yeah.
and then Haitians ate my gay dog. It's like it's yeah,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
no, there and COVID was an excellent example of any evolution denier just watching this virus mutate and change over time. You didn't get Delta and Omicron because it didn't evolve. It just, that right there is evolution in action. And so,
Right.
that's why science communication is so vital. But even when I was trying to do that, TikTok would ban or, kick off videos that I would make about COVID because there was a lot of wanting to suppress the information getting out there, which is terrifying. But I do want to talk to you about the connectivity that you are working on right now because you mentioned, the importance of connectivity when it comes to
Mhm.
natural spaces or just, open spaces for wildlife. And you are heading up the world's largest wildlife crossing and helped get this thing off the ground. Tell me about the Edinburgh Wildlife Crossing.
Yeah, to me, this is one of those that, go and we don't agree on a lot these days, but we do agree on wildlife crossings as well. Most people, no matter how you vote, uh, you know, don't want animals hit by cars. They want to ensure that animals are protected and don't want to hit an animal either, right? To me, yes, I'm leading this, but there's so many partners like the National Park Service, scientists who raise the alarm bell, like Caltrans, our transportation agency, who's helping to build it, like the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy, who helped put the land aside so we could do this. I mean, we work with I work with a championship team, and from everybody from Gavin Newsom on the public side and Secretary Wade Crowfoot to the private side. This is a great where the private stepped up as well, like Wallace Annenberg and Leonardo DiCaprio and everybody. And just to footnote that, I think private philanthropy is now going to be more important than ever, and where we face some of these government programs being eliminated. But yeah, to me, it is a really hopeful project that I am just honored to work on. It's under construction. We're about to put soil on the top in early April, which is a pretty big deal. So it's really exciting. But it is in the Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area. The scientists who have studied the mountain lions and other wildlife for decades now work for the National Park Service. We are looking at and worried about threats to both the federal lands there, which are critical for connectivity, and to the people who are dedicated people doing this work.
Yeah, that has got to be a terrifying time as well for everybody involved. I mean, the inspiration for this particular wildlife crossing. Can you tell me a little bit about him?
P22, yeah. I mean, what a what a cat. I think we all miss him.
What a man.
I mean, yeah, what a man. He was what a man. Love of my life, right? And I only saw him once. It was the perfect relationship. um, but yeah, I mean, P22, I think, much like Jackie and Shadow are doing now. Again, you see people coming together no matter how you vote, watching these two eagles who we can relate
Yeah.
to, those who, people can relate to. They, for 3 years tried to have a family and couldn't, and here they are, they did it. They're about to get 2 feet of snow put on them. I mean, the day-to-day challenges of parenting, but look at how the world is coming together around watching Jackie and Shadow, and it was the same with P22, as we know. He became kind of a global celebrity that, made this journey in the Santa Monica Mountains near where the crossing is going, ends up in Griffith Park, which is in the middle of LA, not just in the outskirts, and is basically trapped because of roads. But he was one of the lucky ones. Most of his mountain lion relatives in the Santa Monica Mountains die, before especially the males before the age of 2 because of these roads and other challenges. And what we know now is the 101 cut off the Santa Monica Mountains from the rest of the world. We know this because of science. We wouldn't even know there was a problem if it wasn't for these dedicated biologists. And We know that P22 kind of became the symbol of this problem, which is these cats were getting hit because cats could not get into the Santa Monica Mountains because of these roadways. Um, the population that P22 belonged to were literally inbreeding themselves out of existence. They couldn't get dates outside their family. So he became a really,
It's a problem.
an example that kind of lifted the science off the paper, and people followed the day-to-day adventures of this amazing cat who was never going to have a girlfriend because of the roads, but who symbolized what these roadways did to these animals in a way that, again, just reading a scientific paper couldn't. And the world rallied around him. It wasn't just that P22 himself should be there, but that mountain lions should have a future. And here we have the Wallace Annenberg Wildlife Crossing being built as we speak so that mountain lions will have a future in the Santa Monica Mountains. Not bad for a
Ah,
little cat. I mean, I think
no, he's
I hope now that he's in cat heaven or wherever they go, he knows what he did. He obviously, I don't think, knew when he was wandering Griffith Park that he launched this worldwide movement, or he was in Time magazine or People, but hopefully he knows now that he did good.
right. It was the booty shot that, changed the world.
The
He
booty
knows.
shot, yeah. I love it. Miguel, the biologist who helped discover one of the first photos of P22. Yeah, he always called it the Puma butt shot. That's how
The
P22
Puma butt shot,
made
yes.
his
Oh,
entrance into the world.
it's so perfect. Make me poo my pants. That would
Yeah.
terrify me. No, he was so gorgeous. I have some kind of like flash questions that I want to
Okay,
get
here
to
we
because
go.
I
I'm in.
I know Beth's a very busy lady, so getting her is I got to make the most.
Never
Well,
too
first of
busy for
all,
you to tell you. Mhm,
well, I
mhm.
love you, my fellow cougar. Yeah, one day we're gonna get two
Two
cougars
cougars, yep, 2
cougars off the
cougars.
ground. We're gonna talk cougars and Gen X crap because we ladies of a certain age. I want to ask you, what is your favorite national park?
Oh, Yosemite, sorry.
Yeah.
I write in my, preface to my book, Yosemite claimed me when I first came here, which is a quote from Robert Redford. So Yosemite, absolutely.
When was the first time you stepped into Yosemite?
1992, I had moved to California in, fall of '91, and, I had just bought a Ford pickup truck. There was a huge snowstorm, and I drove into the park because I had four-wheel drive, and I literally was one of the few people in the Yosemite Valley. Had it to myself, made a snowman, a coyote walked by. I looked up at El Capitan, and I was in love.
Oh my God, that is the perfect introduction. Oh, wow. Well, what do you think is the most underrated national park?
Well, that's a good question. One that's not visited a lot is Great Basin, at least, and I love that park. I'd say, Boston is, the Freedom Trail's in a national park. Like, I also don't wanna, like, I think a lot of people don't realize that a park doesn't need to be a big Western nature landscape. Some of these parks are urban, so, yeah, I'd say, like, the Boston National Park. That's a great I'm from there, and when I go back there, I always walk around, so but there's a lot of underrated parks. I really encourage people. There's parks you probably haven't even heard of. But I also want to put a plug in for the Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area. A lot of people don't even realize that's a national park, but it is. Mhm.
And it's gorgeous. I
It's
grew up
gorgeous.
in
Yeah.
Los Angeles, and I absolutely adore that park. I'm obsessed with frogs, and I never had them in the San Fernando Valleys. I'd have to go there to go
You do
frog to
know
go herping.
this
Uh-huh.
is a little known fact, but
Ooh,
any frog you hear in a movie is likely sound of the Pacific chorus frog, although they were called something else back then, that they
what?
recorded in the sound lots in the Santa Monica Mountains because they needed a frog noise. And back then, the movie lots had open space near them. So they would just go out and record California's frog. And that was recorded. A lot of those sound bites were recorded in the Santa Monica Mountains.
Oh, I love
Yep.
that. We are the
Mhm.
national frog
You're the national frog for movies. Yeah.
the film industry. That makes me very, very happy. You did kinda talk a little bit about, how people can maybe you speak up, but are there any, like, actionable suggestions right
Yeah,
now, like call your representatives to
absolutely.
get things
Make
moving?
noise, please. Call your representative. Call people who aren't your representative. Write to the president, write to these people, write to your local paper, whatever it is, do interviews. get involved with nonprofits who are advocating for public lands. I mean, there's no shortage of them. My own, the National, Wildlife Federation, National Parks Conservation Association, Center for Biology. I mean, I could just go down the list, right? There's so many. Get involved, whether it's a local group or a national group. Talk to your friends. I mean, there's just so many ways. Don't be quiet. Don't assume that because they're a national park that they're not, I think all bets are off. I think that was the assumption. We even had a joke when I worked for the Yosemite, association. Now, national parks, we don't have to worry about, protecting them. It's just about
Oh,
doing. Well, now listen, I think all bets are off. So don't assume, excuse me, that national parks are sacred, that will never be touched. I think all bets are off now. But yes, make noise. Don't be quiet. And especially let your representative know that this is not okay. And be kind to your friends who are working in the federal space now. They're being told they're sloppy, that they don't do work. They have to send every Monday 5 things that they accomplished. I mean, it's insulting to these people, again, who are dedicated public servants who work for under market and who really dedicated their lives to serving the public good. They're in it for that. And to treat them this way, I just think is shameful.
it absolutely is. And for folks that are like, should we go to a national park? Do they need us? Do they want us? What would you say?
I would
Yes, yes,
still
no, no.
go. I'd
Yeah,
still go. Absolutely. Show both the local economies and the parks themselves, excuse me, that you support, but also be prepared. Be prepared for that these cuts may result in limited services. We're not, that's playing out. Check, again, I'm seeing some posts like no park ranger programs available. This visitor center hours cuts. I mean, it's different for every park depending on what staff was cut, right? But just be prepared that it may not be business as usual. So take take special care when you're visiting. But yes, please go. The parks are there for you. They are your lands. This administration should not be messing with that.
yeah. One last thing. What is the filthiest thing that you have done in the name of science?
Ooh, um, picked up poop, mountain lion poop, pika poop, you name it. I'm all about poop.
Yeah. It's a crappy job, right? I mean, but someone's
Crappy
got to do
job,
it.
yeah.
And
And I'd
Beth
say
Pratt,
also, advocating for the dating lives of cougars in LA is
that's
probably a little
hot.
filthy. Sounds like a
Yeah.
porn channel or something, doesn't it? Yeah.
I'm tuning in. I'm signing up. Don't threaten me with a good time. Oh yeah. Well, gosh, Pat. One last thing. Where people can find you, and if you have to jump off because Beth has another very important call,
Yeah,
I
I
can
got
wrap
2
it up.
minutes we can
2
spend.
minutes.
Yeah.
Where can people find you?
They can find me, I'm active on social, both if you want some fun animal photos and also how to help parks these days. I've been really vocal on social. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, I think it's Beth Pratt 1 on Facebook, Beth Pratt on Twitter, and Yosemite Bethy on Instagram. My website's bethpratt.com. Well, please reach out if you have questions about wildlife or just want to fin my I'm on butterfly watch right now. One of my proudest moments was scientists from the Xerces Society came out and checked out a rare butterfly population I've been documenting. That was
Oh,
really
you're the
wonderful.
coolest.
But
And buy her
butterflies,
books.
butterflies and frog porn right now. Butterflies and frogs
What?
in my little study area are mating. So if you want to see butterfly and frog porn, check me out on social.
Slippery when wet. I'm all about that. That is hot. Oh my god. Kermit the Frog was my first crush.
I'll tell you, those guys don't mess around. I posted a photo from some frogs mating yesterday. I'm like, what pose is this in the Kama Sutra? Like, this is pretty intense. Yeah, but it's springtime. Everything is in love.
Oh my god. Totally awesome. Okay, that was a terrible amphibian pun. I adore you, Beth. Thank you so much
Oh,
for
adore you
do
too.
all the
Thanks for having
advocacy.
me, and thank you
Oh,
for dedicating a whole show to our public lands and national parks. It really is important right now. We can't lose them. The wildlife in us are dependent on them.
yes, absolutely. And we're gonna keep fighting the good fight. And thank you for leading the way. Truly,
Thanks.
truly. Thank you.
Take
Well,
care.
2 cougars too. Mwah. I'll
Two
see you.
cougars, baby.
And yeah, thank you so much
Mhm.
for being here, Beth.
All right. We'll talk soon.
I'll see you. I'll see
Bye.
you later.
Take
Okay,
care.
now I gotta think.
Bye.
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 My favorite cougar right there, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to say thank you for tuning in. And next week, I'm very excited to have Carrie, the one on from Math is a Drag. They are an amazing drag performer, but also they teach amazing math lessons to people that are not exactly the most math proficient like yours truly. And so they're going to be on next. Oh dear gosh, hold on. It's I think the 19th at 2 p.m. Pacific time. Yes, yes. Okay. Now to thank my patrons and my amazing producer Peter DeTucker. Thank you very much for making this show possible. My patrons, thank you so much. And if you want to help support the show, please consider joining my Patreon, and you'll get a shout out like this. Thank you to Daniel Wynn, Claude Allen, Simply Tom, Skullbeard, Tori Yates, or Redding Maley. I'll see him in a few weeks. Dana Logan, Michael Z. Weinstock. We got to Galapagos once. David Leitner, I also got to Galapagos with him too. James Hudspeth, Dr. James Hudspeth to you. Anthony Zana, Tom Berman, Jen Beverstock, Scott Froschauer, which actually means frog beater. True story in German. It means frog beater. JSB, Jeff Cohen, Andrea Bloom, and Jonathan Marks, who retires in a couple months. And I am making a video for him. Just a fun side note. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. And until next week, stay very filthy because that is the best way to survive.